Road Signs. Chapter 8. The Lonely Life of a One-Eyed Man. Only now did I let the air out of my lungs and take a deep breath. This machine had nothing to do with people. There were no human beings in it. When it jumped out from behind the turn and its silhouette appeared before my eyes for a second, in that brief moment I managed to notice that the only lit headlight was not to the right or left of the radiator, but in the very center of the windshield. Clifford Seamack. Soon we reached Chudovo and began to slow down little by little. "We have to wait," said Vladimir Pavlovich. "Wait for what?" "Until the circuit cools down." The mathematician barely restrained himself. It was obvious that he was simply furious. What circuit? What's going on? But no one supported him. Moreover, the Buddhists were terribly cheerful and said that it was time to look for water. They donned USSR chemical protection suits and climbed down the embankment. I also decided to get off, and unexpectedly discovered that Vladimir Pavlovich was also getting ready to go with me. The mathematician refused to get off the train, despite the fact that the instruments showed values indistinguishable from the background ones. Vladimir Pavlovich and I unloaded a motorcycle with a sidecar from the third car. I was once again amazed at how much junk there was in this museum exhibit of our train. I won't even mention the weapons. Listen, how did you keep all this safe? How? There was a railway chief named Alexeyev. I don't remember his name and patronymic, but that's completely in vain. He was a saintly man. Before his retirement, he left a lot of such caches. Judging by his age and his habits, he could have easily survived. We filled up the fuel tank, added some additives to the tank, and started the motorcycle. I have always been surprised at how, in the midst of nature, a civilized person finds it pleasant to hear the sound of an engine, smell the stench of gasoline, and feel that the work of his fellow tribesmen is puffing and moving along the road. We put the smartest Buddhist in the sidecar, and the rest followed us along the road. The radiation level here was almost zero, that is, normal, indistinguishable from background radiation. The village we entered was empty, and had been empty for a long time. There was little hope that any unlooted store would remain there, but we still went into one. It turned out to be a store of industrial goods. In the first room, Kuznetsovsky porcelain, now the Vostanye factory, was piled up, which some madman had apparently wanted to steal. He wanted to, but apparently his time in his mad life was up. In another room, some beast was running riot. In the middle of the room, washing machines that seemed enormous to me were scattered. Some of them had opened their hatches to nowhere, and for some reason straw and torn rags were sticking out of these transparent hatches. I squatted down in front of one of these machines and realized what was going on. Inside, like in a birdhouse, lay a clutch of large, chicken-like eggs. Only chickens don't lay eggs of this size, about 10 centimeters in diameter. What kind of eggs these were was completely unclear. But what's even more interesting is that each of the eggs was neatly pierced. I imagined an animal that secretly comes to other people's eggs and sucks out the contents with its long proboscis like a Russian anteater. A Russian anteater is the last thing I need. Vladimir Pavlovich went to look at the knives and discovered that all the hardware had become unusable. "Real Chinese quality," he sighed disappointedly. Then, in order not to leave empty-handed, he took away a small plastic ground beetle flashlight on a hand-pulled rod. We wandered around some more, got some clothes from the least decayed ones, by the way, all of the same Chinese production, and went out. Then our orange brothers arrived. They were already dragging some bundles on themselves. Well done, guys, Eastern wisdom is a good thing. But I categorically approved of the fact that they had dosimeters in their hands. Wisdom is wonderfully complemented by numbers, especially when they are on the screen of a useful device. I looked to the side and then saw one-eyed. At that moment, however, I did not know that he was one-eyed. At the far end of the street there was a man, and next to him was exactly the same motorcycle as ours. The man was happily waving his arms and almost jumping. When we drove up, we discovered that the man was scary. One of his eyes was overgrown with folded, hairy skin. But otherwise his face was good-natured, and he himself was fat, even somewhat round, causing more laughter than alarm. The motorcycle was indeed exactly the same as ours, only ours, although worn by time, was brand new, while One Eye's had clearly been in service for all 20 years. One Eye fussed around us, hugged the Buddhists, had fun, and what I liked most was that he did not have a weapon with him. This meant that the native, who looked like a big, good-natured hunter from the fairy tale about Little Red Riding Hood, was not hunting, at least was not looking for two-legged game, and did not pose a danger. Then I realized that I was mistaken. An old hunting rifle was lying in plain sight in the sidecar of the motorcycle, so he was a hunter, after all. It turned out that One Eye lived in an old military bunker on the outskirts of the village. He sat 2 Buddhists down with him. We took one, and the rest, bending under the weight of the bales, went back to the train. The motorcycles were rattling merrily, and we had to ride along the road even more than I expected. Finally, at the turn, in a completely deserted place, we found a little white house, similar to a trackman's booth, only there were no tracks around. We dismounted and went into the house. It was empty inside, and everything indicated that no one lived there. A table, chairs, some kind of notice board on the wall, were a faded piece of paper with fire safety instructions hung forlornly. But everything was explained simply. One Eye opened the door that at first seemed to me to be a closet door, and we found ourselves in a corridor painted with green oil paint. Having gone down the stairs, we came up against a gray hermetic door with typical stenciled inscriptions like "Attention, Post," and something in the same spirit. The door opened, and One Eye turned around. "But you can't bring weapons in here," the owner of the bunker said sadly. "I have a frame here. How can't you?" "Yes, of course you can. But the arena will howl all the time. I haven't been able to turn it off for 20 years. And he pointed to his gun, which he had already hung on a hook at the entrance. It turned out that the frame, or rather the ledge in the corridor, sticking out from the wall and ceiling by 5 centimeters, reacted to all weapons. And if you brought one inside, the alarm would howl endlessly. In order not to be unfounded, One Eye demonstrated this right away. It howled and blinked really disgustingly, and One Eye did not know how to turn off all this illumination. "I am a simple man, not a military man, that's all," he repeated. The Buddhists nodded their heads, and even Vladimir Pavlovich, gloomy, spread his hands. He really didn't like all this, but there was nowhere to go. On the other hand, we were guests here, and not so long ago in St. Petersburg, we also handed over weapons for safekeeping to military doctors, and nothing terrible came of it. And I won't even mention that the military had a numerical advantage back then, much greater than we have over this owner now. Inside, behind the frame, there were 2 ordinary rooms, behind which was a small hall that resembled an ordinary dining room. Only it immediately became clear that the military had a hand in all this. There was something elusively common in all these bunkers and shelters, no matter where in the country they were located and at what time they were built. I realized what was unusual here. A long table with a metal top and many chairs. It really did not look like a private house at all. A wide staircase led down from this dining room somewhere with all the required posters and numbers on the wall, painted with oil paint. It turned out that One Eye had just gone hunting. "Here's the thing," he explained. "You can only kill the young, otherwise in 2 years the animals get their fix. But otherwise, everything is fine, and the meat is tender and tasty. Soft," he added, and smacked his lips. I couldn't understand whether I liked this man or not. On the one hand, he lives alone. It's enough to drive him crazy. But on the other hand, we could all have gone crazy a long time ago. The owner threw strange-looking pots and pans on the table and ranted. It was not the first time in my life that I had met people who, for one reason or another, lived alone. And I knew this trait, a special type of talkativeness. A person who had been alone for 20 years was silent. He got used to being silent or talking to himself. But a person who had not seen people for a year or several months became terribly talkative. That's why I believed that our owner lived here alone, at least recently. And now, my dears, my wonderful newfound friends, people who have not experienced the taste of modern times, one-eyed, chattered. You will ask, having started a conversation with me about the mystery of the universe, ask, however, on a different plane, where does this magnificence come from? You will start to get indignant. How can you, they say, mix the incompatible cabbage, cinnamon, eggplants, and where do I get the strength to grow and harvest this? Is there a dangerous poison in this fleshy vegetable flesh? Poetics comes to my aid because I am asked about the secret forces. The question is, where do I get the strength for cabbage and eggplants? This is a good question, the right one. A timely question, one might say. Our strength, of course, comes from the roots. We must fall to the roots from time to time. Then the people's strength, indestructible, as the great poet said, will rise in us through the roots. Well, and then innumerable forces will arrive, and we will succeed in singing a song, we will say, like Grisha Nekrasovsky, jumping. But then I will be asked to give some advice on practical application, like, where are they, those roots, and at what angle do we fall to them? Oh, I will answer. This mystery is great. Everything is mixed up in our world after the terrible catastrophe. Everything is mixed up and confused. There is no salvation for us, and the coordinates of the roots are lost. And roots are sought with the heart. In general, we do everything with the heart, and not with the finger, so to speak. So you go up to a good fellow, say to him, "Were you made with the heart?" The good fellow will smile and show you the way. But if you ask him if he was made with the finger, nothing good will come of the conversation. Maybe you will fall to the roots as a result, but you will fall to the wrong ones, to the wrong ones. You will fall to the wrong ones, and all your strength will leave you. That is why I was filled with goodwill towards you. I became attached with all my soul as soon as I saw you on this field philosophical road. The one-eyed man set out the pots and plates on the table in an order known only to him and continued. They will tell me that if you dig deeper into those roots with your finger, then you look and see that you have become a fine fellow. They will say that the heart is a muscle, they will say, a muscle and nothing more. But I will answer that no, that is not what is needed to create a fine fellow. Love and goodwill in people are needed for this. And digging uselessly into the roots, you will only get dirty and confused. You will bring confusion into the heart. You will not make a fine fellow with a muscle. You will make him with special bodies that live in caves, and that is why they are called cavernous bodies. And how to do this, that is still a great secret. That is why this mystery is called exogical-terical, because it is not simple, and does not grow on every terrifying thing. It does not weave its roots in every cave, not every egg is laid in a clutch, not every seed is kept and protected by its secret shell. And whichever one it does keep, from that will be born the mystery of the universe. So much so that everything will return. The dead world leaders will wake up, the revived old lady will crawl out of her bomb shelter, and, cheerfully tapping her stick, cross the road. All the gold in the world will be found and will get its price back, and the children in the sandboxes, covered with radioactive ash, will also wake up. It began to seem to me that One-Eyed was just a crazy school teacher who had been reading philosophical books for 20 years. And he probably read them alone, and that's why he went crazy. I almost went crazy too, while I was self-educating in an abandoned library, but I still had a bunch of people around me, and I had to work for society. And this stream of subconsciousness just kept pouring out of One-Eyed. Vladimir Pavlovich secretly checked the cabbage with a dosimeter, and it turned out to be completely normal. And when the owner brought him a glass of moonshine, he became even kinder. One-Eyed, meanwhile, told me that for the first few years after the Holocaust, he lived in a completely different place with his wife and came across a whole warehouse with black caviar. For several years, he ate only black caviar and hated it worse than death. His wife was with him then, but she was ill for a long time, and when she died, he set off on a journey and found this abandoned bunker. My premonitions were justified. He really did go a little crazy in solitude, and the abandoned library was present in his story. One-Eyed suggested that we go to the train and get something there, in exchange for fresh and dried meat that he had prepared. What I liked about our meal was that One-Eyed had very tasty water from somewhere, the same spring water that I drank a long time ago. However, he also slipped us juniper tincture and mead, which he made himself. According to him, a tank of industrial alcohol was found in the bunker, which he had not even been able to fill in half in 10 years. And the mead was a trace of his beekeeping. There were enough rooms in the underground bunker, and we occupied a separate cage, equipped with a false window, with a mountain view painted on it. We drank the tincture, and somehow immediately felt sleepy. Vladimir Pavlovich was a light sleeper, but just in case the door was propped open with a metal chair. But the trouble was, towards morning, I was overcome, apparently because of the unfamiliar food. I quietly opened the door and crawled out into the corridor, lit by dim emergency lights. I thought for a minute which way the bathroom was, and then went to the right, towards the light. The bathroom was there, and, quite remarkable, the light came through a small, round porthole in the metal door. Behind it, in a large room with white-tiled floors and walls, our host was sitting with his back to me. On the opposite wall hung a black Kalashnikov assault rifle with a clip wiped white. But the most interesting thing was in the middle of the room. On a zinc table right in front of One-Eyed lay one of our Buddhists, completely lifeless. It was hard to imagine that a man, whose carcass was being cut up like a pig, could remain alive. The landscape was completed by a single leg, already cut off from the body and placed on the side of the table. I must admit, I had never seen anything like it. What shocked me even more was that One-Eyed was singing. He was singing some strange song about Egypt and the Nile. What did I care about Egypt and the Nile? Maybe Egypt no longer exists in this world, but I still exist. I ran on tiptoe to Vladimir Pavlovich, who immediately got dressed. We woke up the Buddhists. Having learned what was going on, they turned green with horror, and we began to make our way to the exit. No, the door upstairs was equipped with a combination lock. The trap slammed shut. We, trying not to make any noise, went down to the dining room, when suddenly the light went out. The front door slammed shut, and One-Eyed's voice came from behind it. Well, the guests were impolite and want to leave without saying goodbye. How impolite, how impolite. I immediately imagined that One-Eyed had put on a night vision device. Why isn't he shooting? I whispered to Vladimir Pavlovich. He's afraid of ruining our fur, he answered from the darkness. In fact, he doesn't need bullet marks on the walls at all. Why would he need it? What if someone else comes to visit? The Buddhists realized that they had nothing to lose and began to sing nasal. It wouldn't take long for one to go crazy from all that singing. A cannibal and apathetic people rolled into one. Funeral with music. However, the funeral will probably happen when the cannibal has completely digested us. The guests are misbehaving. The owner's voice was heard again behind the door. The guests must be punished. One-Eyed was hovering by the door, obviously preparing for something. I voiced my assumption about the night vision device out loud. It was pitch black, but our owner had not taken into account that we had spent half our lives in the subway tunnels. This was not something that could be expected of St. Petersburgers, but we had learned to listen to the darkness. Vladimir Pavlovich, realizing that One-Eyed had not yet entered the room, whispered in my ear, "I have a flashlight. It's plastic, so it went through the frame. As soon as he enters, try to hit him in the eye with the slingshot. I mean, in the eyepiece." I took out the slingshot and took a few breaths to calm down. Instead of a bullet, I unscrewed a large nut from the bottom of the table. "Once again, pull yourself together," repeated Vladimir Pavlovich. "Now I'll turn on the light. I'll try to hit his night vision device with the beam. He'll go blind for a second, so try not to miss this second." At that moment, One-Eyed creaked the door. "Well, Sasha, do it. Come on, damn it, come on." I pulled the rubber band on the slingshot. My bullet whistled into flight, and One-Eyed screamed, clutching his eye, or rather his broken night vision device. It seemed that the fragments penetrated quite deeply, and One-Eyed was completely blinded. Continuing to scream, he disappeared behind the wall. What now? "We'll make our way upstairs. What else?" answered Vladimir Pavlovich. Only how to get through was completely unclear. The hermetic door at the top, leading to the fake house, was locked with a combination lock. Our thoughts were interrupted by a monstrous roar behind the wall. We rushed to the door, which our host did not think or was not able to lock. Having run along a long corridor, we found ourselves in a huge, overwhelming in its size, underground hangar. In the middle of it stood a monster machine with 2 cabins, about 20 meters long, with 8 wheels on each side. It made a rather scary impression, especially in a closed hangar. The one-eyed man climbed into the left cabin and was rummaging around with something there. "And what is this?" I asked the surrounding space. And the space answered through the mouth of one of our companions. "This is MZKT, squeezed out one of the Buddhists, an elderly man. "What?" "A tractor of this kind. I mean, it's not MAZ, it's MZKT, which means Minsk Tractor Plant. It's a platform for a strategic missile." He named 5 or 6 more numbers that I didn't want to remember at all. The main thing I understood was that it was a missile tractor without a missile, a launch complex devoid of combat payload. Now everything fell into place, and it was clear what the old owner was doing. I wonder, though, if he launched his topol or fired it off somewhere in the swamp. "And how do you know that?" I asked the Buddhist anyway. "Yes, I built them," he sighed and looked to the side. "I built them, the bastards, in the city of Minsk. He'll definitely open the gates now, so let's rush forward. Our owner is no fool. He'll stand at the gates and finish us off there. The passage is narrow, and he'll blindly lay us all down there." The engine of the car, which had died down, roared, and the whole space around was filled with sour, bitter smoke. The gates creaked and opened. Of course, during this time they had ceased to be real hermetic gates. The rubber had flown off everywhere, but it was clear that fate would not provide us with any hole suitable for climbing out. Now he would drive forward, close the gate, and call his people. One-eyed, or rather, now eyeless, climbed out of the cabin and began to feel around in the space in front of him with the barrel of his machine gun. The Buddhists, trying not to make noise, climbed onto the platform of the machine. I understood what had to be done and whispered to Vladimir Pavlovich that we were climbing down under the belly of this gigantic wheeled monster. The edge of the platform was at our head level. Having squeezed between the wheels, the railroad worker and I hung under the bottom. Fortunately, Some kind-hearted person had provided brackets of an unclear purpose there. We turned out to be right. An unenviable fate awaited those who climbed into the place of the rocket. Our hosts, as a precaution, cleared the upper space with long bursts. Only one Buddhist remained unharmed, sprawled on the roof of the cabin. The gates finally opened, and the tractor, roaring, moved up a long path resembling a ramp. Soon, the steep concrete exit from the hangar ended, and the tractor found itself, judging by the pine needles and branches on the road, in the forest. The car was not going fast, but it was going extremely smoothly. It seemed that we had avoided the worst. And then our Buddhist comrade fell, and fell badly, landing right under the wheel of the turning car. Moreover, 3 wheels turned at once, so the fallen man had no chance. We heard nothing over the noise of the engine, no scream, no groan. We were luckier. Vladimir Pavlovich and I plopped down in the road sand at the moment when the tractor slowed down on the rise, and we lay there for a long time, listening to the rumbling Shaitan cart moving away. "How do you think it drives blindly?" I asked. "It doesn't drive. It's probably an autopilot. The route was programmed into its memory a long time ago. Or maybe our nearsighted friend changed it a long time ago. It doesn't matter, though. What worries me more is that such things never stood alone. Our hospitable host is probably hoping for help. So we need to hurry." And we did. Having found our way by the sun, we quickly set off on our way to the railroad.